Georgia's death row for more than 2 decades, but he's maintained his innocence the entire time. Ryan Kruger shows us how one last-ditch effort by his children to keep their dad alive.
They were just kids when their father, Donnie Lance, was convicted of brutally killing their mother. As adults, Jesse Lance and Stephanie Cape say their dad has always played a big part of their life, despite being behind bars. But the relief they sought didn't come. On Tuesday, the board denied Lance's request for clemency. His execution is scheduled for Wednesday night. He took his case all the way to the United States Supreme Court last year, but they chose not to hear his appeal. Prosecutors say in 1997, Lance killed his ex-wife Joy and her new boyfriend Butch Wood. Witnesses testified that Lance had been abusive in the past and threatened to kill Joy. But to the kids who already lost their mom, they're hoping for a miracle to save their dad. In their letter, they write,
"At exactly 9:05 p.m. on January 29, 2020, the execution began. The fluorescent lights in the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison death chamber buzzed quietly overhead. 66-year-old Donnie Cleveland Lance lay strapped to a gurney, his arms outstretched, needles in both arms, pumping lethal chemicals into his veins. He didn't say a word. Not to his executioners. Not to his family. Not to God. Just moments before, officials had asked him if he had any final words. Lance shook his head. Silence. No apology. No last plea. No attempt at closure. He had chosen to die that way, quiet, defiant, and alone. But behind that stillness was a brutal history that led him here. 23 years earlier, on the night of November 8, 1997, Donnie Lance broke into the Jackson County home of his ex-wife, Joy Lance, and her boyfriend, Dwight "Buddy" Wood Jr. He bludgeoned Joy to death with the butt of a shotgun, then turned the weapon on Buddy and shot him twice. Joy's blood stained the floor. The shotgun was never recovered. Lance never confessed. Now, 2 decades later, after countless appeals, a rejected clemency plea, and a final denial from the U.S. Supreme Court on execution day, Georgia made it official. Donnie Lance's story ended with a lethal dose of pentobarbital, administered at 9:02 p.m., and by 9:11, he was pronounced dead. Thank you for watching and helping this channel grow. If you're drawn to the real stories behind death row, the crimes, the victims, and the final moments, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of justice, one case at a time. Donnie Cleveland Lance was born in 1953, in Jackson County, Georgia, a rural part of the state where people kept to themselves and personal business often stayed behind closed doors. To many in town, Donnie was a hard worker, but those closest to him saw a darker side, volatile, controlling, and dangerously possessive. That dark side came to the surface most violently in his relationship with his ex-wife, Sabrina "Joy" Lance. Sabrina was 39 years old in 1997. She was described by family as a loving mother and a woman trying to rebuild her life. After enduring years of abuse, she had finally left Donnie for good. The divorce didn't stop the threats. Donnie had allegedly beaten her, choked her, and stalked her even after the marriage ended. Sabrina eventually started a new relationship with a man named Dwight "Butch" Wood Jr., who was only 33 years old, 6 years younger than her. The two had grown close, and Sabrina often stayed at his home in Jackson County. To friends and family, it looked like she was finally finding peace. But Donnie couldn't stand it. Court records, family testimony, and witness statements made it clear Donnie never moved on. He couldn't handle the idea of another man in her life. Friends recalled him making threatening comments like, "She's not gonna live with another man." The obsession built slowly. He asked around for shotgun shells. He told people she was going to pay. Sabrina herself had warned people she feared Donnie would kill her. In the weeks leading up to the crime, Donnie had become erratic. He made multiple attempts to track her down. It wasn't a mystery to anyone who knew them. Donnie Lance was spiraling. Then, on the night of November 8, 1997, he made his final move. He drove to Dwight's home with a shotgun, crossed the threshold uninvited, and committed a crime so personal, so brutal, that investigators said it was like watching a murder scripted by rage. It would end 2 lives, shatter 2 families, and ignite a legal battle that dragged on for more than 2 decades. Saturday, November 8, 1997. Jackson County, Georgia. Sabrina Joy Lance, 39, had gone to bed with her boyfriend, Dwight Butch Wood Jr., a 33-year-old former truck driver who she'd been seeing since separating from her ex-husband, Donnie Cleveland Lance. They were inside Butch's house off quiet, rural property. Nothing felt unusual that night, until it was far too late. Shortly before midnight, neighbors reported hearing noises, a car pulling up, a door slamming, maybe a bang, but no one called police. In this part of Georgia, strange noises at night weren't uncommon. What they didn't know was that Donnie Lance, obsessed and seething with jealousy, had pulled into Butch's driveway with a loaded 12-gauge shotgun in hand. He wasn't there to talk. He wasn't there to threaten. He had come to kill. Lance forced his way into the home, possibly through the front door. Inside, Sabrina and Butch had no warning. There was no sign of a struggle. What followed was cold-blooded, calculated violence. According to court documents, Donnie first confronted Butch in the hallway and fired 2 shotgun blasts, one into his chest, the other into his face. Butch collapsed instantly, killed where he stood. He never even had a chance to reach for help. Then Lance turned to Sabrina. He didn't shoot her. He beat her to death with the butt of the shotgun, so viciously that her skull was crushed, according to the medical examiner. It was intimate, personal, the kind of violence that spoke not just of murder, but of rage born from years of toxic control. She had tried to escape him, and now, she lay lifeless in a pool of blood beside the man she had chosen to love instead. Number 911 call was ever made. The house went silent again. It wasn't until the next morning, November 9, 1997, that the scene was discovered. Dwight Wood's father, worried after not hearing from his son, came by the house. What he found was a double homicide, his son shot dead, his son's girlfriend brutally beaten and unrecognizable. Police arrived quickly. The scene was chaos, blood on the walls, shell casings on the floor, a broken gun stock, boot prints. Donnie's truck was seen parked nearby earlier that night. He had no alibi. No one else had threatened Sabrina or Butch. And the moment investigators pulled his history, restraining orders, domestic violence reports, repeated threats, the case locked in fast. The shotgun used in the murder was never recovered. But ballistic evidence confirmed a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun had been used. Shell fragments matched shells Lance was known to have owned. Tire impressions outside the house were consistent with his vehicle. A neighbor recalled seeing his Ford truck in the area earlier that evening. Donnie Lance was arrested within 24 hours of the murders. He denied involvement. He refused to cooperate. He never confessed. But to the people of Jackson County, and to Sabrina and Butch's grieving families, the truth was already written in blood. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was the culmination of years of abuse, manipulation, and unchecked rage. A woman tried to move on. Her ex-husband couldn't let go. And 2 people paid the ultimate price. Donnie Cleveland Lance was arrested just hours after Joy and Buddy were found dead. The evidence was overwhelming. He had no alibi, a well-documented history of violence against Joy, and a trail of threats that, in hindsight, read like a blueprint for murder. Still, he pleaded not guilty. In August 1999, nearly 2 years after the murders, Donnie Lance stood trial in Jackson County Superior Court. The prosecution painted a picture of obsession and control. They laid out his abusive marriage, the stalking, the shotgun, the threats. Joy had warned people he might kill her. She was right. Witnesses testified that Donnie had asked them where he could get shotgun shells. Others said he told them Joy was gonna get what's coming. Prosecutors described how Joy had been so afraid of Donnie that she'd gone into hiding at her boyfriend's house. But even that hadn't saved her. No murder weapon was ever found, and there were no eyewitnesses. But forensic evidence filled in the blanks. Footprints and tire tracks matched Donnie's truck. Blood traces tied back to the crime scene. Circumstantial, but devastating. It took the jury just 1 hour to sentence him to death. Donnie's defense argued that the case lacked hard physical evidence, that no one had seen him commit the crime. But it didn't matter. The pattern was there, and the jury believed he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. After his conviction, Donnie Lance was sent to Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison, where the state's death row is housed. For the next 20 years, he lived in a small concrete cell, isolated for 23 hours a day. His appeals stretched into the 2000s and 2010s. His legal team tried everything, arguing he had brain damage, possibly caused by repeated head trauma from a past career as a boxer and multiple car accidents. They said he had a low IQ and struggled to understand his punishment. In 2019, his children submitted a clemency petition. Both had lost their mother, but still, Donnie was their father. They asked the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles to spare his life. "We've already lost so much," they pleaded. But the state refused. On January 27, 2020, the board denied clemency. 2 days later, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to intervene. There were no more legal options left. Donnie Lance's date with death had arrived. January 29, 2020. The last full day of Donnie Cleveland Lance's life. Inside the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia, the mood was tense. Guards walked with extra purpose. Everything was protocol now. That morning, Lance awoke in his solitary cell on death row, where he'd spent more than 20 years staring at the same concrete walls, waiting. At 8 a.m., he was informed the execution would proceed that evening. The U.S. Supreme Court had denied his final request for a stay. It was official, Donnie would die that night. His attorneys tried one last emergency appeal. They argued again that Donnie had suffered severe brain damage, couldn't fully understand his punishment, and had been denied crucial DNA testing on the evidence. But by 5 p.m., every motion had been denied. Georgia was moving forward. That evening, prison officials offered him his last meal. 2 chili steak burgers, French fries, onion rings, mustard, ketchup, and a soda. As the clock inched toward the execution hour, Donnie was moved to a holding area just steps from the death chamber. There, he was given the chance to speak with a spiritual advisor, though details of their conversation were kept private. He made no official statement, left no letter, and gave no public expression of remorse. At 8:30 p.m., he was escorted into the bright, sterile death chamber. Witnesses later described the atmosphere as eerily calm. Donnie lay flat on the gurney, arms extended, leather straps cinched across his chest and limbs. His eyes blinked slowly, his mouth tight, but he said nothing. The warden leaned in. "Do you have any final words?" Donnie Lance shook his head. No apology to his children. No plea for forgiveness. Just silence. At 9:02 p.m., the lethal injection began. The chemical, pentobarbital, entered his bloodstream. Within seconds, his body began to slow. His chest rose and fell a few more times, then stopped. At 9:05 p.m., he appeared unconscious. By 9:11 p.m., a prison doctor stepped forward, checked his vitals, and pronounced him dead. His daughter and son, who had begged the courts to save him, did not witness the execution. No family members of Joy or Buddy would attend it either. Donnie Lance's life ended not with violence, but with cold, calculated procedure. No noise. No last words. Just a final breath and a flat line. Donnie Cleveland Lance was pronounced dead at 9:11 p.m., but his case didn't die with him. In the days that followed, headlines across the nation reignited the debate. Did Georgia execute a man without letting science speak? Lance had always maintained his innocence. He never confessed. Never admitted guilt. And in the final years of his life, his attorneys raised serious concerns. Chief among them, that no DNA testing had ever been done on critical evidence. The gun used to bludgeon Joy, the bloody shirt found near the scene, the boot prints, and other forensic material that could have either confirmed or challenged the prosecution's case. But the Georgia courts consistently denied those requests. Even worse, his legal team argued that Donnie was mentally impaired. They said he'd sustained severe brain trauma from years of boxing and multiple car wrecks, and he lacked the cognitive ability to understand the full weight of his execution. A 2015 report found his IQ ranged between 65 and 70, well below the threshold for intellectual disability under Supreme Court precedent. Yet, none of this was ever presented to the original jury that sentenced him to death in 1999. And so, critics asked, was this justice? Or a rush to closure? Meanwhile, Joy's family remained silent in the public eye. They never gave interviews, never appeared on the news. For them, justice may have come late, but it came. Still, Lance's children, now adults, were left shattered. They'd lost their mother to murder and their father to execution. In their own words, the state made us orphans twice. The case also drew attention from organizations like the Southern Center for Human Rights, which condemned the execution as a moral and legal failure. No DNA testing. No full mental evaluation. Just silence and death, one representative said. In the end, Donnie Lance's case became less about guilt and more about what the system chose not to do. He may very well have been guilty. But the lingering question is this: if justice is truly blind, why not allow the truth every chance to speak? Donnie Lance died in silence, but the questions he left behind still echo through the halls of Georgia's courts, and in the hearts of two children who will never stop asking why.